They fined me for casting a fishing line. So I bought the entire lake and banned the whole neighborhood. This is a story of how one petty fine led to the ultimate revenge, HOA style. And trust me, it gets juicy. I never thought casting a line on a quiet Sunday morning would turn into a neighborhood civil war. It started like any other weekend. A cup of black coffee in one hand, my old tackle box in the other, and the rhythmic sound of birdsong guiding me toward the lake that sat peacefully behind my backyard. I'd moved into the suburban neighborhood 2 years ago after selling my tech startup, eager to trade 18-hour workdays and concrete city noise for something slower, quieter. Fishing had always been my escape, something I did with my grandfather back when life was simple and summers lasted forever. That lake was more than just water. It was my sanctuary, a place to think, to breathe, to remember. So when the envelope arrived, a crisp white letter from the HOA stuffed inside my mailbox, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a routine update about landscaping schedules or another warning to stop putting garbage bins out too early. I was wrong. The letter was short, cold, and irritatingly smug. Dear Mr. McNeil, it has come to our attention that you were observed fishing in the community lake on multiple occasions. As per HOA Regulation 6.7b, unauthorized fishing on shared residential lakefront is prohibited. The citation has been issued, and a $200 fine has been applied to your account. Kindly remit payment within 15 business days to avoid additional penalties. Sincerely, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. I read it twice, then a third time. Unauthorized fishing? I had a direct access gate from my backyard to the lake. Half the reason I bought the house was because of that view and that water. And now some clipboard-wielding HOA enforcer was telling me I couldn't dip a line in it? Annoyed but curious, I started asking around. My neighbor 2 houses down, Dave, a retired firefighter with a beer belly and an endless supply of lawn care jokes, told me he used to fish there all the time. Said no one ever gave him trouble. Karen, he said with a chuckle, she's on a power trip. Ever since she became HOA president, she's been sniffing for problems. My kid got fined for parking his truck too close to the curb. Next week, it was the color of our mailbox. I thanked him and walked back home, gripping the letter like it had personally insulted my family. This wasn't just about a fine. This was about principle. I'd followed every stupid HOA rule since moving in. I paid my dues on time. I mowed my lawn every Thursday like clockwork. I even repainted my shutters the exact shade of approved navy they wanted. But this was personal. The next day, I showed up at the monthly HOA board meeting. It was held in the community clubhouse, a small, overly air-conditioned room that smelled of stale coffee and artificial pine cleaner. Folding chairs formed a rough semicircle facing a cheap plastic podium, where Karen stood, arms crossed and smiled tight enough to crack stone. She was in her early 60s, dressed like a discount real estate agent. Beige suit, matching heels, a pearl necklace that glinted under the fluorescent lights. Her blonde bob was ironed into place with what I could only assume was industrial-strength hairspray. She greeted me with the kind of smile people give when they're pretending to be polite, but can't quite hide their disdain. "Mr. McNeil," she said, "so glad you could join us." I held up the letter. I'd like to dispute this fine. Her smile thinned. As it states, fishing is prohibited in the lake. We had complaints about wildlife disruption and safety issues. Complaints? From who? I'm afraid that's confidential. I laughed. So an anonymous neighbor complains, and you fine me $200? It's not about the amount. It's about maintaining community standards. What standard is that? No enjoying nature? Karen blinked. You can fish at the public lake in Pine Hill Park. That's 5 miles away. And I live on the lake. You live adjacent to it. It's a community resource, not personal property. I could feel the eyes of the dozen or so board members and residents watching us. A few looked uncomfortable. One guy in the back even nodded slightly in agreement with me, but no one spoke up. "I'm not paying the fine," I said. Karen shrugged. "Then we'll assess additional penalties, up to and including a lien on your property." That got my attention. A lien? Over a fishing line? I left the meeting boiling with frustration. They weren't just overreaching. They were outright bullying. I had money, I had time, and most importantly, I had the motivation. If they wanted to fight, they just hooked the wrong fish. That night, I poured myself a bourbon and sat at my computer. I started digging. I wanted to understand the lake, who built it, who owned it, what the rules were. It didn't take long to uncover a strange little detail buried in the original development filings. The lake wasn't technically owned by the HOA. It was managed by an old landscaping company that went defunct 10 years ago. After some legal gymnastics, it passed into a trust that had been managed by a regional bank. That bank had since merged with another, and now the property sat under a portfolio of non-performing assets. In plain English, the lake was in legal limbo. I called the bank the next morning and asked if the property, parcel hashtag 198-34A, Lake Woodrow, was for sale. The woman on the other end sounded surprised. I even knew what that was. She transferred me twice, and finally, a manager came on the line. Are you seriously interested in acquiring it? Depends on the price. Well, it's not been maintained. It's not generating revenue. We need to unload the liability. How does $12,000 sound? I nearly dropped the phone. I'll pay in cash, I said. Try not to sound too eager. Send me the paperwork. Over the next 2 weeks, while Karen continued to send me overdue notices and threats of additional fines, I was quietly becoming the legal owner of the lake she was supposedly protecting. I even created a shell LLC to handle the paperwork, Woodrow Properties LLC, just to keep things clean. The deal closed on Friday. I owned the lake. Let that sink in. The very body of water they claimed I had no right to fish in, that they'd find me over, lecture me about, and use to assert control, was now mine. Every shimmering drop of it. I didn't even tell anyone at first. I wanted to enjoy the moment. That Saturday, I went out like I always did. Same folding chair, same fishing rod, same old tackle box. I cast my line into the glassy water and leaned back, grinning like a fool. I didn't catch anything that morning, but it didn't matter. I wasn't fishing for fish. I was fishing for revenge. The next letter didn't come from the HOA. It came from me. I had it printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with a classy gold trim. It was hand-delivered to every home in the neighborhood and placed inside their mailboxes, just under the latest HOA bulletin. To whom it may concern, as of date, the private property commonly referred to as Lake Woodrow has been transferred in full ownership to Woodrow Properties, LLC. Effective immediately, all unauthorized access to the lake, its banks, and surrounding buffer zones is strictly prohibited. This includes fishing, swimming, boating, and walking pets near the waterline. Violators will be considered trespassers and subject to legal enforcement. Thank you for respecting private property. Management Woodrow Properties, LLC. I imagine the sound of Karen's teeth grinding as she read it. I didn't hear from the HOA for 3 days. Then an email not from Karen, but from the HOA's treasurer. Dear Mr. McNeil, we like to discuss the lake situation amicably. Perhaps a meeting? Oh, now they wanted to talk. I ignored it. Instead, I hired a security company to install 3 high-resolution cameras and motion-activated lights near the access points. I put up polished wooden signs that read, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I even had a small dock built with a comfy Adirondack chair and a cooler stand. The next time I fished, I wore sunglasses and a straw hat and waved at the couple on the walking path behind the new fence. They waved back nervously. The lake wasn't just water anymore. It was leverage, and I had a whole lot more where that came from. They wanted to find me for fishing. I was about to reel in a bigger plan. The emails came in waves. The first few were polite. A request for a meeting. A suggestion to collaborate for the betterment of the community. Then came the passive-aggressive ones. Subject lines like clarification on lake use and community disruption concerns. Finally, the messages dropped all pretense and became outright demands. Karen's tone shifted from artificial sweetness to bureaucratic aggression. She cited HOA covenants, misquoted zoning laws, and even invoked the neighborhood's historical rights to the lake. The last one made me laugh out loud. The lake wasn't the Constitution. It was a glorified retention pond that had been neglected for years, until I started fishing in it. Now, it was the crown jewel of her imaginary kingdom. I let the emails pile up unanswered for a full week. Meanwhile, I had work to do. First, I cleaned up the lake's perimeter, not out of obligation, but for fun. I had a landscaping crew remove the old rusted bench the HOA never bothered to fix and plant a row of low hedges along the north end. My end. Then, I installed a stylish black wrought iron gate at the only community access point and locked it. A bold private, "No trespassing," sign hung right in the center, in full view of the walking trail. The transformation was subtle, but loud in meaning. This was no longer a community lake. This was mine. A few days later, I saw a group of kids walking down the trail with fishing rods. They reached the new gate, stopped, and looked confused, then disappointed. One of them turned and saw me sitting in my chair, sipping a cold drink and reading a book next to my fishing pole. "Hey, mister, is the lake closed?" "Private property," I said calmly. "New owner. Sorry, guys." They shuffled away. I felt a pang of guilt, but reminded myself who made it come to this. Later that evening, their parents posted angrily on the HOA's community Facebook page, demanding answers. Karen tried to do damage control, claiming the lake's ownership transfer was temporary and in review. I didn't respond, but I did screenshot everything. This was getting fun. On Saturday morning, I received a certified letter at my door. This one bore the threatening red stamp of a legal office, Whitmore, Stanton, and Fields. Karen's husband was a retired attorney. Of course. "Dear Mr. McNeil, you are hereby notified that the HOA intends to dispute the legitimacy of your recent property acquisition of Lake Woodrow. As per Article 9, Section C of the HOA Charter, any changes to common use spaces must be ratified by a majority vote of the HOA Board. Until this matter is resolved, you are advised to refrain from enforcing private ownership restrictions on HOA residents. Failure to comply may result in legal action." I read it 3 times and laughed harder each time. Nice try. Their precious charter had no authority over the lake. It wasn't in their jurisdiction. It was never in their deed. And the common use claim? Useless. You can't retroactively declare dominion over something your HOA never legally owned. They might as well have claimed the moon. But I wasn't content to just let the facts do the talking. I wanted them to feel it. I contacted a local law firm, not flashy, but experienced. The senior partner specialized in real estate conflicts and loved a good HOA fight. We drafted a response. To the board of the Lakeview Pines HOA. My client, Mr. McNeil, is the lawful owner of the parcel identified as Lake Woodrow. This acquisition has been verified, recorded, and is not subject to the HOA charter, which does not and has never included said property. Continued interference, public misrepresentation, or unauthorized entry onto Mr. McNeil's property will be regarded as civil trespass and defamation. Please govern yourselves accordingly. I sent a physical copy to Karen, one to the HOA's attorney husband, and, for good measure, posted a photo of it on the community bulletin board. It was a nuke disguised as a memo. By midweek, the neighborhood buzzed like a kick beehive, whispers at the mailbox, sideways glances at the grocery store. People who had never spoken to me before now nodded sympathetically as I passed. One evening, Dave, my beer-bellied neighbor, showed up with a 6-pack. "Thought you might want a victory drink," he said, grinning. "I haven't won yet," I replied, "but I'm enjoying the first few rounds." He cracked open a can. "Everyone's talking about it. Some folks think you're a legend. Others think you're the devil. I'm fine being either, as long as I'm not boring." He laughed, then lowered his voice. "Karen's losing it. She called an emergency HOA meeting this weekend. Wants to vote on legal action. She's welcome to try. She will..." Saturday came, and the HOA meeting drew the biggest crowd the clubhouse had seen in years. I didn't go, but Dave gave me the play-by-play afterward. Apparently, Karen opened with a PowerPoint, an actual PowerPoint. She outlined how my hostile takeover of the lake was a threat to community harmony, claimed it would reduce property values, and, this was rich, suggested I might one day poison the water supply. Someone asked if she had proof or just paranoid fantasies. She threatened to have them removed. Then came the vote. She needed 2/3 of the homeowners to approve legal action against me. She got 42%. The rest either abstained or flat out opposed. Karen lost. Badly. The next morning, she showed up at my front door. I opened it slowly, curious how this would go. She wore oversized sunglasses and held a folder. "I'd like to speak with you," she said stiffly. "Are you here in a personal or HOA capacity?" She hesitated. "Personal." I stepped aside. "Then come on in." We sat across from each other at my dining table. I didn't offer coffee. "I think this situation has gotten out of hand," she began. "I agree. I didn't mean for it to become a legal issue. I was just enforcing the rules." "Rules you invented?" "They were vague. I enforced them based on precedent. Funny, since everyone I've talked to says they fish without issue for years." She shifted in her seat. I may have been too rigid. I said nothing. "I'd like to propose a compromise. This should be good. You open access to the lake for residents again. Just basic fishing and walking trails. We remove the fine. Wipe the slate clean. And if I don't," she sighed, "you'll continue being the villain." "I'm fine with that." Karen pursed her lips, stood, and left the folder on the table. "Just think about it," she said, and walked out. I didn't open the folder. I tossed it in the shredder. Later that week, a sign appeared on the clubhouse bulletin board. New HOA guidelines for community etiquette. Respect property boundaries. Avoid confrontational behavior. Let's work together, not against each other. It was unsigned, but everyone knew who posted it. Karen's leash was tightening, and I was the one holding it. That weekend, I hosted a barbecue. Lakeside, of course. A few friendly neighbors came by. Dave brought burgers. A couple brought lawn chairs and snacks. Everyone fished. Legally. Meanwhile, I installed a motion sensor sprinkler system near the community access path, just in case anyone got brave. By the end of the evening, as fireflies blinked over the water and laughter echoed across my yard, I realized something. I wasn't just defending my right to fish. I was creating peace on my terms, and the HOA couldn't do a damn thing about it. You can own a lake, but you can't buy peace, not when Karen's still on the warpath. I was enjoying a morning fishing session when I first noticed a drone. It buzzed faintly at first, just a small black dot in the sky, hovering too long over my backyard like a mechanical mosquito. I watched it circle the lake slowly, dipping low enough that I could see the tiny camera lens pointed straight at me. I didn't wave. Instead, I picked up my phone and started recording. If they were going to spy, I'd let them know I was watching too. 15 minutes later, it zipped away, vanishing over the rooftops. But I already had a pretty good idea where it came from. Only one person in this neighborhood would be petty enough to launch a drone over my property. Karen. Turns out, I was right. That afternoon, I received a notice, not from the HOA this time, but from the city zoning office. Someone had submitted an anonymous complaint alleging that I was commercializing my property and operating an unlicensed recreational venue. Apparently, the barbecue I hosted the weekend before, plus the dock, the camera installations, and my well-maintained trail system were enough to raise suspicion. Fortunately, I was ready. The zoning inspector who came out was polite, clipboard in hand, squinting at the dock like it was a crime scene. "Mind if I take a look around?" he asked. "Be my guest." He walked the perimeter, asked a few questions, and took a few photos. When he got to the part about recreational venue, I explained it plainly. No public events. No paid access. It's just me and a few invited friends, using my own lake. He nodded, jotted something down, and said, "Looks fine to me. You'd be surprised how many of these complaints we get from HOAs with too much time on their hands." I smiled. Wouldn't surprise me one bit. As he walked back to his truck, I asked, "So, will the complainer be notified?" He smirked. "They'll get a copy of the inspection report." That made my whole week. But Karen wasn't done. Over the next few days, she escalated. First, She tried to push a new HOA resolution to construct a privacy wall along the trail side of the lake, funded by increased dues, of course. The community forum exploded with angry comments. Why are we paying for his lake? This wasn't even an issue until Karen started poking the bear. Can we recall the HOA board? Is that a thing? Then she started spreading rumors that I was planning to drain the lake and build a water slide, that I was throwing wild parties, that I had endangered local wildlife. I heard it all secondhand from Dave and a few sympathetic neighbors who become regulars at my weekend hangouts. She's grasping. Dave told me over a grilled hot dog one Saturday. People are tired of her antics. You've got more support now than she does. It felt good, not just a vindication, but the sense of control. The lake had given me something I didn't even realize I'd lost in the years of startup chaos. The ability to set my own pace, to create something peaceful, something mine. But Karen couldn't let go. Then came the straw that nearly broke everything. One morning, I stepped out to check on the lake and found a fresh pile of dog feces right in the middle of my dock. Not the trail, not the grass. The dock, intentionally placed. Next to it was a note written in pink Sharpie on HOA stationery. This isn't just your lake. You'll see. K. She really signed it. She couldn't even pretend it was anonymous anymore. I took photos, saved a note, and called my lawyer. I want to file a police report for trespassing. I told him. You sure you want to go that route? He asked. It'll get ugly fast. It already has. He nodded. Then let's do it. A uniformed officer came by that evening. Friendly, young, probably no older than 30. I showed him the pictures, the note, the footage from my motion sensor camera that caught Karen entering the dock around midnight the night before. He whistled. Well, that's definitely her. Can we charge her? For trespassing, yes. Maybe harassment if the DA's in a good mood. Want me to press charges? I paused, then nodded. Yes. The paperwork took an hour. The officer thanked me and said Karen would be contacted soon. And just like that, the petty war turned legal. 3 days later, Karen was served. The entire neighborhood knew within hours. Some said she screamed. Others said she fainted. Either way, her precious HOA kingdom began to crack. Board members started stepping down. One cited toxic leadership. Another said it was time to focus on family. By the end of the week, Karen was left with one loyal board member, a guy who owned a landscaping company she personally hired. The HOA was imploding, and I hadn't lifted a finger. Not beyond fishing, fencing, and a couple of legal letters. Ironically, I didn't even fish much anymore. I still loved it, sure, but the lake had become more than just a hobby. It was a symbol, a trophy. So instead of just catching fish, I decided to do something bigger. I emailed the local wildlife association, told them I own a private lake, and wanted to improve its ecosystem. Within 2 weeks, a small team came out, ran water quality tests, and helped me restock the fish population with native species. They even offered to help install new plantings around the shore to attract birds and frogs. The best part? I applied for a conservation grant and got approved. So now, not only was the lake private, it was protected. That meant any damage, littering, or unauthorized use of property could now be reported not just as trespassing, but as a violation of state conservation law. Karen couldn't even look at the lake anymore without risking a lawsuit. On the first day of fall, as orange leaves drifted into the water, I stood on the dock and looked out across the lake. Still, quiet, peaceful. Karen had all but disappeared from public view. Her house was up for sale. The HOA board had been reduced to monthly Zoom meetings, where the only item on the agenda was whether to repaint the tennis court benches. The drama was gone, and I missed it a little, but not enough to let go of the victory. I baited my line one last time and cast it out gently, letting the lure ripple across the surface. The lake belonged to me now, and everyone knew it. They tried to find me for fishing, so I turned their peaceful pond into the symbol of their collapse. The lake was quiet now, too quiet. For months, the shoreline had been alive, with kids fishing, neighbors chatting, Karen spying. But after her legal notice and HOA meltdown, it was like the whole community went into hiding. No walkers, no strollers, no gossip. Karen had retreated behind her curtains, only spotted once in a while peeking out from the second floor of her colonial-style fortress, watching me like some bitter ghost of petty power. But I knew better. She wasn't done. Not yet. My prediction came true one breezy October afternoon. I was replacing one of the dock planks when Dave burst into my backyard, out of breath and waving his phone. "Bro, you're going to want to see this." I wiped my hands and took the phone. It was a post from Karen on the community Facebook group, a long-winded, all-caps tirade titled, "Emergency HOA Alert, Lake Lawsuit Filed." Apparently, Karen had filed a civil nuisance claim in district court. She claimed that the lake activities had created excessive noise, endangered wildlife, and ruined neighborhood tranquility. She included blurry photos of my Saturday barbecues, footage from her drone, and a statement alleging that I had encouraged unauthorized gatherings of strangers near private property. At the end of the post, she added dramatically, "This isn't over. The lake belongs to you us all." I laughed so hard, I almost dropped the phone. She really did it. I said to Dave, "She's going down with the ship." The court date was set for 3 weeks later. I brought my lawyer, a folder of documents, and a portable projector. Karen showed up in a beige power suit, like she was heading to a Senate hearing. Her lawyer was her husband, because of course he was. The judge was a middle-aged woman who clearly had little patience for HOA squabbles. Karen started her argument. Her husband used words like environmental degradation and emotional distress. She nearly cried talking about how the lake used to be her favorite walking spot, and now it was barricaded like a fortress of exclusion. Then it was my turn. I pulled out the property deed, presented photographs showing the trash I cleaned up when I first bought it, played a video montage of the family barbecues. Nothing loud, nothing chaotic, just wholesome neighborly fun. Then I dropped the conservation grant packet with the seal of the state environmental department. And then, the cherry on top, I played the motion sensor camera footage of her placing the dog feces on my dock. The courtroom was silent. Karen looked like she wanted to evaporate. The judge reviewed everything, leaned back in her chair, and said, "There is no case here. Mr. McNeil is the lawful property owner. He's within his rights. As for the actions of the plaintiff, I'd recommend some serious reflection before engaging in further neighbor disputes." Case dismissed. I smiled and nodded to Karen as I walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look at me. After that, things unraveled quickly. Karen's husband was disbarred temporarily for unethical conduct, representing his wife in a frivolous suit without proper filing disclosures. He tried to appeal. He lost. Their house was taken off the market, then back on, then off again. Eventually, I found out why. They couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted to move into a neighborhood where the HOA was in shambles and one of the board members had been publicly humiliated in court. Her name had become infamous in local real estate circles. One agent called her the Pawn Queen behind her back. A month later, the HOA finally voted Karen off the board. Permanently. She didn't show up to the meeting. Someone said she moved in with her sister 3 towns over. Others claimed she had a breakdown. I didn't care. What mattered was this. I had won. And I wasn't done. With Karen gone and the HOA too weak to stop me, I decided to make one final move. A community celebration. But not for the whole neighborhood. Just for those who had supported me, stayed civil, or, at the very least, didn't treat me like a villain for owning my own lake. I called it the Lake Liberation Party. I rented a live folk band, set up a floating platform in the middle of the lake, grilled enough meat to feed an army, and passed out commemorative beer koozies that read, "Hooked, Find, and Free, 2025. Dozens came. Neighbors I barely knew showed up with drinks, snacks, and folding chairs. The lake shimmered under the light strung between trees. Kids caught sunfish from the dock while their parents laughed over drinks. That night, Dave gave a toast. He stood up on a cooler, raised his red Solo cup, and shouted, "To the man who bought a lake, just to teach an HOA a lesson." Cheers erupted. Glasses clinked. Even the fish seemed to be celebrating, jumping in the moonlight. I stood near the shore, watching it all unfold. The lake I wasn't allowed to fish in, now it was my kingdom. A few days later, I walked the full path around the lake for the first time since I bought it. The leaves were changing, crisp and golden. The trail was clean. Birds chirped. The water was calm. At the old community gate, now permanently locked, I saw a note tucked into the iron bars. It was written in neat handwriting. You turned a petty fine into a legendary win. Thanks for standing up to her. A neighbor who used to be too scared to speak. I folded the note and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's peaceful, like a still lake, owned, protected, and finally, quiet.